In 2009, DC announced a new ongoing title for Batgirl, a mantle that had been worn by several women throughout history, most notably Barbara Gordon. I did a whole video covering the history of Batgirl when I reviewed the final story arc of the previous Batgirl at that point, Cassandra Cain. Cassandra was the mostly mute offspring of two members of the League of Assassins, David Cain and Lady Shiva. David attempted to raise Cassandra to be the perfect killer, only for it to fall apart when she abandoned his dream after her first hit. After gaining her voice in the numerous adventures of Batgirl, including taking on Shiva multiple times, Cassandra had one final confrontation with her mother. Shiva wanted Cassandra to kill her and assume her position in the League of Assassins. Cassandra would eventually impale Shiva on a hook, but leave her dangling over a Lazarus pit, which would lead to a resurrection. From there, things would start to get kind of weird, as in the wake of the Infinite Crisis event, Bruce Wayne would take Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, and Tim Drake, aka Robin, to a monastery called Nanda Parbat located in Tibet. This was done to better control their emotions and hone their fighting skills. It would take a year to complete this process. Not only was Cassandra upset about being left behind, she wasn't even tasked with overlooking Gotham City. That responsibility would fall to Harvey Dent, who had seemingly shed his Two-Face persona. It was then that Cassandra was approached by longtime Teen Titans foe Deathstroke the Terminator, aka Slade Wilson. I should point out that Cassandra and Slade had actually encountered each other before when she was filling in for an injured Nightwing in the city of Bloodhaven. He was very impressed by her fighting skills. Deathstroke began selling himself as the type of mentor Cassandra needed, one that wouldn't walk out like Bruce Wayne. While doing so, he remotely injected her with the same serum that augmented his abilities as well as his daughter Rose's. This warped Cassandra's mind enough for her to join him. When Tim Drake returned to Gotham City, he found that Cassandra had framed him for murder and attempted to lure him over to the League of Assassins so that she could attempt to recreate her father's plan of making the perfect killer. Cassandra would then join a group of Titans formed by Deathstroke that launched an assault on the actual Teen Titans building in San Francisco. However, during the attack, Tim managed to inject a counter serum into Cassandra, which freed her from Deathstroke's control. Cassandra attempted to rejoin the Bat family, even joining the Outsiders at Batman's behest, but ultimately she would feel that it was time to move on. It's here where a character named Stephanie Brown enters the story. She has a very unique history in her own right. Stephanie Brown was the daughter of Arthur Brown, a failed game show host turned low-level villain named the Clue Master. Upon discovering her father's identity, Steph fashioned a hero outfit and dubbed herself the Spoiler because she was attempting to spoil the Clue Master's plans. Stephanie would eventually encounter Batman and Robin, where she would have an on-again, off-again relationship with Tim Drake. During one of the off periods, Stephanie became pregnant, and Tim helped her through the pregnancy with her giving the baby up for adoption. Stephanie would also befriend Cassandra Cain, providing a lighthearted counterpart to the more intensely introverted Batgirl. After a while, Tim Drake's father eventually discovered that he was Robin and forced him to give up the role, with Stephanie volunteering to pick it up. Batman was reluctant to take on Stephanie, as she was often inattentive and not too serious at taking the superhero game. He would eventually give her a try, but it didn't really work out, and she was fired after a very short period. It's here where things really began to fall apart for Stephanie, as she tried to impress Batman by implementing one of his simulated crime scenarios to take out several organizations at once. All she needed was for a man named Matches Malone to initiate the plan. She was unaware that Matches Malone was an alias that Bruce Wayne would use when going undercover as a crime hood. This would lead to a massive war breaking out between all the crime organizations in Gotham that would soon engulf the entire city. In the middle of all of it, Stephanie was abducted by a mob boss named Black Mask, who tortured her in order to learn Batman's identity. He would beat her mercilessly, but eventually she would manage to stage an escape and make it to a local hospital. However, in an attempt to make a point to Batman about employing underage teenagers, Dr. Leslie Tompkins withheld treatment, leading to Stephanie's apparent death. The storyline was really not well received at all, with many fans chalking it up to women in refrigerator syndrome and deriding the fact that Stephanie wouldn't even get a memorial in the Batcave. So it would be implemented later that Leslie Tompkins had actually faked Stephanie's death in order to still teach Batman a lesson, and he had suspected this, which is why she didn't get a memorial in the Batcave. Anyway, Stephanie would resume being Spoiler and even resume her relationship with Tim Drake. However, neither would last. Instead, we're looking at Stephanie taking on a new mantle. This is the first 12 issues of her adventures as Batgirl. So here is Batgirl Stephanie Brown, Volume 1. In the Foundry Part section of Gotham City, an illegal street race goes down. The goal is to stop closest to a concrete wall, lose, and you're most likely dead. However, the race is halted by the sudden silhouette of Batgirl. She takes down the drivers, and all of this is witnessed by Batman and Robin, who have realized that this is not Cassandra Cain. In fact, 3 weeks earlier, Cassandra was working on a case with Spoiler and attempting to break up a smuggling ring. After taking down a large group of thugs, Cassandra, feeling that it was time to move on from the hero game, removed her costume and turned it over to Stephanie. And I guess Cassandra just ran off in her underwear, because I didn't see a change of clothes located anywhere nearby, did you?
The funny thing is, Stephanie has already promised her mother, Dr. Crystal Brown, to give up the vigilante game and enjoy some waffles. So Stephanie will have to carry on in secret as she attends Gotham University. While at school, she befriends a young man named Francisco, but runs afoul of his lady friend Jordana. Meanwhile, Leslie Tompkins invites Barbara Gordon to a wheelchair basketball game. She wants Barbara to talk with a new patient who was also recently paralyzed named Wendy Harris.
Wendy Harris was a former member of the Teen Titans alongside her brother Marvin, where the two served as technological experts. They would even adopt a dog named Wonder Dog, who then turned out to be an apocalyptic hellbeast who killed Marvin and attacked Wendy, leaving her paralyzed. And if you haven't figured it out, yes, they are named after the original kid sidekicks from the Super Friends.
Barbara is unsure about becoming a mentor, as it brings up a lot of past trauma for her as well. Added to all that, her father Jim has been trying to play matchmaker with a new detective named Nick Gage. Added to all of this, she's also getting a lot of calls from Dick Grayson.
Okay, so this takes place after the final Crisis event, which culminated in Batman's apparent death. Though in reality he was trapped falling through time, the rest of the universe thinks he's dead at this point. After a brief scuffle with Jason Todd, Dick Grayson will assume the mantle of Batman and enlists Damian Wayne to become the new Robin. Damian is the son of Bruce Wayne and his longtime love interest / enemy Talia al Ghul, making Damian the grandson of longtime nemesis Ra's al Ghul. As for what happened to Tim Drake, we'll explain later. I also am not going to get entirely into Damian's backstory because we just don't have enough time.
Stephanie goes out as Batgirl once again to quell a riot where Detective Gage has been taken hostage. In the midst of the scuffle, a rocket launcher is accidentally dropped, resulting in an explosion and everyone barely managing to escape from the building. On the plus side, she seems to make a connection with Gage. Stephanie is so wired that she doesn't get any sleep and goes into the kitchen for some coffee where Barbara Gordon is waiting. Dr. Brown got called off to the ER. Suffice to say, she is not pleased and accuses Stephanie of having a death wish, pointing out that while Stephanie is trying to start small, she'll eventually start attracting the attention of larger, more infamous criminals. Stephanie angrily tells Barbara to back off and heads to class, where Francisco invites her to a party. Meanwhile, Barbara goes to work as Oracle, helping the coroner deal with a kid who died of a drug overdose that really elevated his adrenaline levels. At the party, Stephanie bumps into an already inebriated and shockingly violent Jordana. Jordana collapses as more violence begins to break out. Seeing a group of thugs duck into an alley, Steph decides to put on her now fraying Batgirl costume. It's then that Barbara remotely interjects to reluctantly coach Stephanie through the fight. Unfortunately, it allows the numbers game to catch up, and the thugs escape as Barbara fries her servers. Barbara is forced to call in a favor from Alfred to use the Batcave computer and reconnects with Stephanie. Barbara is able to locate one of the thugs named Steve, who went to the emergency room after overdosing on this new drug called Thrill. However, Barbara tells Stephanie to stay out or she'll tell her mother. As Steve is taken into custody by Detective Gage, the car suddenly gets filled with a vaporized version of Thrill. As the police begin fighting each other off, Steve is taken back to the man behind the development of Thrill, Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow.
At this point, Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow, was the main drug manufacturer for the crime boss Black Mask. That's the same Black Mask who beat Stephanie within an inch of her life earlier. Now at this point, Black Mask himself may have been killed by Catwoman. I can't really remember when that happened.
Barbara seemingly relents to help Stephanie track down Scarecrow's lab. After injecting her conveniently ripped costume with a fear toxin vaccine, Stephanie heads inside. However, Crane has figured out that Steve was being followed and dopes up his thugs with more Thrill. Crane then smashes a vial of Thrill into Stephanie's face, which continues to pleasingly rip the costume. The vaccine takes a while to work though, so Stephanie begins seeing the Bat family, including Tim and Cassandra Cain, belittling her. Finally, Barbara begins encouraging Stephanie to fight back, and she does, quickly taking down Scarecrow by breaking his ankle. When the police arrive, Stephanie uses a time-tested Bat family escape tactic.
Smoke bomb!
Over the next few days, Barbara decides to begin both Wendy Harris and Stephanie Brown, even taking an associate professorship at Gotham University. Now she can work with Stephanie. Later, Babs gives Steph a new Batgirl outfit.
Considering the fact the old costume was being held together with paper clips and chewing gum at this point, it's probably a good idea to replace it.
Stephanie eagerly takes out the new suit for a test run. She happens across a group of thieves hitting up a skyscraper. She manages to catch the falling bodies and drops them onto the Bat tour bus. After giving the appreciative crowd a rather unflattering view, the power suddenly goes out in all of Gotham City. Stephanie elects to go out on patrol, and Barbara gets a call from Leslie Tompkins. Apparently, Wendy Harris has been rehabbing in the dark. Babs tries to explain that Wendy has turned down all offers of help, but the good doctor points out that's usually when people need help the most. So Barbara works with Wendy, who continues to be stubborn in her denial of paralysis. Finally, Wendy just breaks down and admits that she has survivor's guilt over Marvin. Babs tells Wendy that she isn't alone and that everything will eventually turn out. Meanwhile, Batgirl tags a purse thief. She knocks him into a burning barrel and picks up the purse, only to realize that it belongs to her mother. As this all plays out, Commissioner Gordon and Detective Gage are investigating a dead body at the baseball stadium. The backup generator is allowed for the lights to be turned on. It turns out the body was flung into the stadium and it has a Gotham Utility Workers Union ID badge. It's at this point that Stephanie notices some activity going on at the Gotham power plant. It turns out that Livewire has hit up the Gotham power grid in order to feed. Stephanie arrives, flirting with Detective Gage along the way, much to Gordon's ire. Stephanie attempts to attack Livewire, but of course any offense is pretty much ineffective against a being of pure electricity. Finally, Stephanie uses a fire hydrant to short Livewire out. Afterwards, Stephanie and Barbara reflect on the night before getting some much-needed sleep. However, there is little rest for the weary as soon riots break out in the Devil Square district of Gotham. The main target is a real estate developer named Stefano Garcia, who happens to be the father to Stephanie's friend Francisco. Batgirl arrives and happens across the culprit, a supervillain calling himself Diesel.
Hey, that guy doesn't look anything like Kevin Nash.
Batgirl attempts to neutralize Diesel with some freezing batarangs, but he breaks free and begins spraying gasoline around the room. It's then that Batman and Robin arrive, and it looks like things are going to go smoothly, except Damian doesn't take into account the gasoline that's accumulating on the floor. Stephanie steps up to help and throws out some more freezing batarangs. Unfortunately, while it does put the fire out, some of them hit Damian and wind up freezing him in the process. Suffice to say, Dick is upset and rips into Barbara for drafting someone the Bat family has always considered reckless back into the crime game. But Babs points out that Damian is the grandson of Ra's al Ghul, and he's also a trained assassin. Damian is upset because he really wanted to meet Cassandra Cain. Suffice to say, this whole thing doesn't end particularly well. The next day, Stephanie is doing some volunteer work at the library where she overhears Jordana and Francisco. He says that his father really needs him to do something before Steph's eavesdropping is detected. Afterwards, Stephanie talks with Francisco, who admits that Jordana is not his girlfriend, and it does lead to a promised meetup for coffee later. However, all of this gets interrupted by Steph realizing that Damian has been following her the whole time. Damian admits that he's perplexed, not knowing why exactly her motivation is for becoming Batgirl. However, it's hard for Steph to take this seriously as the whole time he's been staring at her chest. Meanwhile, thanks to some trickeration from Commissioner Gordon, Gage and Barbara meet at the diner near the police department. Things start off well, right up until he makes a wheelchair joke.
Ooh, busted.
While out on patrol, Stephanie can't help but thinking about Francisco, especially when she spots him at the campus coffee house. She's forced to go undercover and tries talking to her friend, only for a group of goons to show up and grab him. Stephanie tries to fight them off, only for one of them to pull a gun and shoot. Stephanie soon wakes up in an ambulance headed for West Mercy Hospital, which is where her mother works. She gives the covert name of Fay Ray, which tips Barbara off to her location, allowing Oracle to hack the emergency vehicle and crash it, allowing Stephanie to escape. Batman is naturally called in by Commissioner Gordon about the abduction. Something doesn't add up as Batgirl watches from afar. That is until Damian interjects himself into things again and the two begin fighting. This results in Batman dropping both of them from the case. So Stephanie and Damian are forced to work together on this, separate from Batman. They check up on Jordana, who explains everything. Stefano Garcia is a compulsive gambler. He's racked up some big debts, but the kidnappers aren't looking for ransom. They have other plans in mind. It's then that Batman comes across Francisco being carried off by Roxy Rocket. Rocket drops the college freshman, only for it to turn out to be a dummy. It turns out this whole kidnapping was staged to lure Batman into a fight and for Roulette to be the one to profit from it.
Roxy Rocket is a former stunt woman named Roxanne Sutton who was run out of the business for being too dangerous and thus turned to a life of crime. She's actually rather unique in that she sort of debuted in the Batman animated series. And by sort of, it's because she actually debuted in an issue of the Batman Adventures comic that was tied into the animated series. Then she migrated over for an episode appearance in the Batman animated series and Superman animated series. Then she eventually migrated over to the mainstream DC Comics universe.
Knowing that his mentor is in peril, Damian rushes off to the scene with Stephanie close behind. She wants to help, but he isn't up for it and escapes via
smoke bomb!
However, Barbara has something for Stephanie located in a private garage. It's a prototype vehicle called the Ricochet. This enables Stephanie to catch up to Damian and plan a better strategy. Batman is squaring off with Dr. Phosphorus, with Roxy Rocket planning a second strike and getting a massive percentage of DVD sales.
Yeah, do remember that this is 2009. Though streaming is starting to gain in popularity, it really hasn't taken hold yet, and physical media is still really popular.
Damian arrives and sends his motorcycle crashing into Phosphorus, while Stephanie ejects from the Ricochet to hitch a ride with Roxy. She commandeers the rocket and crashes into Phosphorus again. The two then fight off a group of henchmen to get Batman to safety. From there, Oracle hacks Roulette's computers to learn her location and bring the villain to justice. For now.
So, it looks like Stephanie has been fully accepted in the Bat family, and Francisco has been reunited with Jordana and someone who appears to be his boyfriend. Yeah, who knew? Anyway, there's one last lingering question to deal with here. What exactly happened to Tim Drake? Well, when Dick Grayson assumed the mantle of Batman and made Damian Robin, he asked Tim to give up the mantle of Robin and take a new one, seeing that Tim was roughly the same age Dick was when he stopped being Robin and becoming Nightwing. To that end, Tim rechristened himself Red Robin, which now means I have to make this joke.
Red Robin, yum!
As Red Robin, Tim would set out to prove that Bruce Wayne was technically still alive, which, okay, he was, but again, the rest of the world thinks he's dead at this point. And that would actually wind up leading to conflicts with Stephanie. See, Bruce had left a contingency plan with Stephanie, should he die, to get Tim to accept it better by continuously undermining any efforts to bring him back. And this would eventually lead to the two breaking up. Tim has been traveling the world ever since to try to find where Bruce is.
Stephanie is going through some training in the Batcave, only being interrupted by Tim, surprised to see his ex-girlfriend in the Batgirl outfit. There's still quite a bit of tension between the two as they try to talk, but it's interrupted by an alarm from the Tompkins clinic. Barbara, meanwhile, is on a makeup date with Detective Gage when everyone's phones suddenly start blinking out. She even manages to spot Steph and Tim racing by in their respective vehicles. Tim manages to figure out the League of Assassins has been trying to access encrypted files on the clinic's computer. The group was unable to hack the computer and gain any of the encrypted files, so now they have implemented Plan B, which is to take Dr. Tompkins hostage. However, Leslie and Wendy Harris are at a fundraising gala, meaning that Tim and Stephanie are going to need a wardrobe change in order to protect her. Tim engages with several guests for a distraction for Stephanie to get Leslie to safety. Soon the power goes out and Leslie has to hide in an empty sarcophagus. It doesn't go smoothly as Steph inadvertently decks Tim, but they manage to beat back the bad guys, and Oracle calls in a favor from Supergirl to take out the communications satellite that was nullifying all the power in Gotham. Afterwards, Stephanie tells Tim that it was nice working together, but this isn't a rekindling. She really needs to be her own person. However, none of this really matters because it turns out that Tim also has someone in his life right now.
Okay, so this young woman is Prudence, or Prue. She's a former member of the League of Assassins who's been traveling with Tim, and it's not really that important because the story's over at this point.
Stephanie is literally flagging down a trade with a suicide bomber on board. She has Oracle kill the lights on the train to take the bad guy out before he can blow anything up. Afterwards, she even gets a bit of gratitude from Jim Gordon, as well as a minor warning to be careful with Detective Gage. It then starts raining. Hard. Stephanie heads back to Gotham U to meet with Barbara and officially be introduced to Wendy Harris. As this happens, Gordon and Gage are investigating a death at a local tech firm. It appears to be a suicide, but the blood looks a tad excessive given everything involved. Gage then begins investigating who was behind all of this. Meanwhile, Barbara and Stephanie are working on the Batcave computer, which has gotten shorted out thanks to a leak from the massive rain they've been getting.
Yeah, this is probably the one glaring flaw of having your major crime-fighting organization operating out of a cave.
Babs gets the computer working enough to get a notice about the dead tech employee, and Steph goes out. She arrives as Detective Gage is suddenly being attacked by a security guard speaking entirely in binary. The guard launches himself through a window and begins falling. Stephanie attempts to catch him with a grappling hook, but he's too hard to hold on to and he winds up falling to his death. Stephanie blames herself for the death, and both Detective Gage and Oracle are trying to calm her down. The guard was clearly not in the right mind. In fact, he was being controlled via nanite technology in his blood. Barbara soon realizes that this was a distraction and she knows who's behind it. 15 miles outside of Gotham, a woman brings a briefcase into a remote controller who's located in a compound. It's the Calculator.
Noah Cutler is a former mathematics prodigy turned low-level supervillain who thought he could calculate the best percentages to pull off a crime. That is, until he heard of Oracle and decided to become the supervillain equivalent, offering logistics, break-in plans, and tracking the whereabouts of superheroes so that crime could be more effectively pulled off. He's also the father of Wendy and Marvin Harris and attempted to use a computer virus based on technology from the planet Apocalypse to restore Wendy's ability to walk. I'll explain more on what happened after that later.
Barbara explains that because of the Calculator's abilities, she'll have to disconnect from the web and Stephanie. Stephanie tries to reunite with Barbara at Gotham U only to find Detective Gage standing in her office. Even though he's unaware of Stephanie's identity as Batgirl, Gage manages to bond with her over the previous night, as he was hoping to talk to Babs about it. Meanwhile, Wendy Harris receives a message that leads her into the sub-basement containing the Ricochet. She's greeted by a message from Oracle, though it's a pre-recorded message and it doesn't reveal anything as to her identity. As this is happening, Barbara is instructing her class when Calculator begins hijacking mobile communications to inject the nanites into the citizens of Gotham, which happen to include most of her students. Others who wind up getting infected include Detective Gage, Jim Gordon, and Jordana. Calculator's message is clear. Find Oracle or Barbara Gordon and kill anyone who gets in your way. Calculator hopes his special guest is excited for this family reunion that's upcoming.
Okay, so this ties into two separate earlier stories. The first was from Teen Titans, where Calculator kidnapped a team member named Kid Eternity and used him to try to bring Marvin's soul back from the Netherrealm and put it back into Marvin's body. However, Marvin refused to be revived, and now Noah Cutler is dragging around his son's corpse. Anyway, the second is from a miniseries called Oracle the Cure. This is where Calculator attempted to use the nanite technology to give Wendy the ability to walk again, only to be thwarted by Barbara Gordon, who revealed herself as Oracle in the process.
Stephanie manages to come to Barbara's aid, and the two attempt an escape. Unfortunately, the two are completely surrounded, and soon Barbara is covered in nanites and taken away. Batgirl tries to pursue, but she's jumped by possessed versions of Catwoman, the Huntress, and Man-Bat.
Man-Bat is a scientist named Kirk Langstrom who injected himself with a serum derived from bat DNA that he thought would give people the ability of echolocation and thus aid people suffering from deafness. Unfortunately, it just turned him into a bat-human hybrid, and he's walked a very fine line ever since. Sometimes he does want to try to be a hero, however, at other points that bat persona really does take over.
Barbara wakes up in bed, somehow having regained her ability to walk and marrying Dick Grayson. She's cooking Thanksgiving dinner for her family, including Tim, Damien, and Jim Gordon. She soon realizes this is a dream when she sees Batgirl outside the dining room window. She's then greeted by Calculator cosplaying as the Joker. In reality, she's actually being held in the Calculator's stronghold, and he intends to link their minds together so he can learn all of her secrets and eventually kill her. Meanwhile, Stephanie does her best to invade the techno-zombies, and suddenly she receives a call from Wendy Harris. Stephanie reveals that the Calculator is behind everything, and Wendy helps in getting Batgirl into the sewers. Wendy then manages to track down the nanite signal to the compound outside of Gotham, as Stephanie takes down the Man-Bat. Back with Barbara, she squares off with the Calculator in a library filled with blank books, which is representing a mental block that she's using to keep him from learning any secrets. However, she's figured out that if he can enter her mind, then she can enter his. The two find themselves tumbling into a room where a young Noah is being kept in a cage, forced to do equations until his fingers bleed. The two continue fighting and fall into another room. This is the day Wendy and Marvin were brought back from the hospital.
See, because Noah Cutler was so obsessed to try to build an easy life for his family as the Calculator, he didn't realize that his wife was suffering from postnatal depression and she wound up taking her own life in the kid's bedroom.
Wendy manages to pilot the Ricochet to Stephanie and the two meet up. However, this thing isn't going to make it through the swamp, so they're going to have to borrow a small plane intended for skydiving. Along the flight to the compound, Stephanie reveals her identity and explains who Barbara is. She then parachutes down into the compound. She makes her way through the security grid and bumps straight into Marvin's corpse. This greatly upsets Wendy. Stephanie does manage to make her way into a control room, which automatically triggers the self-destruct. Wendy, choking back tears, decides to crash her plane into the compound to see if she can help everything out. Inside the computer, Calculator intends to hit the kill switch, will take out both him and Barbara. However, Wendy deactivates everything, freeing Oracle. The Calculator, however, is left inside to rot away in his own mind. A few days later, and the rain has stopped, with things seemingly returning to normal, or as normal as it can be for Gotham City. Stephanie points out that Wendy can start over rather easily, and now she has some friends to help her along the way. To that end, Wendy takes the name Proxy and begins working together with Oracle to aid Batgirl.
And this is good because now Stephanie and Barbara can watch UK Netflix. And that concludes our look at Batgirl Stephanie Brown Volume 1. How was it? Well, there's a lot to like in this book. I really like a lot of the characterization in it. There's some really good witty dialogue. Everyone's fun, but still kind of grounded and serious when they need to be. It does this really well. And there's some really good storytelling in this. It's very brisk. This is 12 issues long. I think because a lot of the stories are only 3 issues in a piece, it goes by really quickly. It doesn't feel like it's really bogged down, a lot of padding or anything like that. And you know what? For the most part, the artwork is really good, particularly in the action scenes. That being said, I do have some problems with the artwork, namely that it does kind of get really cheesecakey sometimes. I mean, early on when the convenient ripping of the Batgirl costume is happening and there's like a little side boob happening and there's a little rip near the top of the leg and there's a little rip here and a little rip there, and it does kind of feel a little out of place. Not to mention there is this really out of nowhere scene with Stephanie in a shower that's like, you know, you could have staged this any other way. Do we really need to go with strategically placed shower bubbles? Again, you're just trying to go a little too sexy there when I don't think you need to. And Then there's this scene here. I mean, I get where they're going for with this, that they're trying to get the idea of, Wendy at this emotional breakdown. But it ruins a lot of the gravitas when it's just staged in this manner that says, don't worry, guys, Wendy might be in a wheelchair, but she's still got a great ass. It just, again, sometimes feels a real out of place. And then there's the guest artist, Talent Caldwell, who does the Tim Drake reunion story. It's fine. I like Talent Caldwell's art, but right here, I mean, Tim and Stephanie are supposed to be about 18 or 19, and they look like they're about 30. They just look too old for this type of role here. It doesn't come across very well at all. Still, though, this is a really enjoyable book, and I don't think there's any problem with picking this up. I'm going to give Batgirl Stephanie Brown Volume 1 a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. There, you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember, like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.